And if you are a Cardinal fan, you're telling me there's still a chance because Albert Pujols is not going to be the manager of the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, California, USA World. They interviewed him here in St. Louis. Perry Manassian, the general manager of the Angels, interviewed Albert about a week ago right here in St. Louis, gauging his interest in managing the Angels or replacing Ron Washington. Albert was gauging the Angels' interest in him, and apparently they weren't interested enough in him to give him a longer-term deal and a bigger money deal than they were originally going to provide for him. So Albert is still talking to the Orioles. He is talking to the Padres about their managerial job, but he's not going to the Angels where they were already paying him $1 million a year for a personal services deal.
I also wonder, how much of the money discussion was also maybe about the roster. If you're Albert Pujols, how much of that discussion is like, I know how you run things when you're the owner of a team when it comes to the roster. I know how things work around this building when the roster has questions around it. And you're willing to do the quick money, but you have an issue with long-term thought processes coming from your office. And so how is that going to change? And it wouldn't shock me if not just like a personal salary thing, but if also some other factors, long-term discussion that the plan, the vision. I wonder if that is also where things didn't line up.
Well, and I think the Angels need to come to grips with the fact that what they've done for well over a decade now is not working. When you're signing Albert Pujols, when you're signing Josh Hamilton, when you're bringing Shohei Ohtani over, when you're signing C.J. Wilson, when you're signing Anthony Rendon, it just has not worked. And kind of like the Cardinals, when they reset, I think it's incumbent upon the Angels now to perform a similar reset. If they're going to go younger, do they want a guy like Albert Pujols? Now, I would ask, do they want an inexperienced manager? Clearly they do, because they just hired Kurt Suzuki as their new manager, and he has no managerial experience. But I wonder if they perceive that it's more difficult for an uber talented former player who's a future Hall of Famer and one of the all-time greats, who by all accounts was one of the hardest workers on his team, to be a manager. There are some spectacular talents who don't wind up being good teachers. Steve Carlton always wanted to do it, but he said, I don't know if I can. And he was never really given the opportunity. I've told the story before. One time, I said this to Bernie a couple of weeks ago. When Joe Torre was in his last year as the Cardinal manager, and he knew he was going to be, he brought in his buddy Bob Gibson as pitching coach. And one day I was down the first base line. The old ballpark had the bullpen down the first base line. And I'm standing next to Bob Gibson and a pitcher. And the pitcher asked, and it was a relatively young pitcher, hey, Bob, how did you throw your slider? And Gibson showed him the grip, and then he said, well, and then what? And Gibson said, well, just throw it, because he was such a natural talent. He thought that he could tell somebody, just throw it. Well, that's not the way it works when you're trying to teach people. And I wonder, Matthew, if Albert would be in that sort of a situation where just such a gifted individual, if somebody's saying, well, how do you see that? And he said, well, you just do. Because Brad Thompson told us on several occasions that Albert would say, you don't see the changeup? And no, not everybody can, but you could. He's a different animal. He's an incredibly instinctive baseball player. Not everybody is. So a lot of players need to be taught. And it's hard if you have those instincts to really teach somebody. And Albert has worked exceptionally hard. I'm not taking away from that. But he's also an incredible natural talent. I was listening to an interview that Ted Williams was doing. It was Bob Costas, Ted Williams, and Tony Gwynn. And Williams was talking about that red dot that you see on a baseball when it's coming in. He said, you see that red dot on a curveball? And Gwynn said, what are you talking about? I see the ball. He said, and Williams said, no, you see a red dot. And Gwynn didn't see it, but that's what told Ted Williams that a curveball was on the way. Another example, Ted Williams with Mark McGwire, 1999 All-Star game at Fenway, was saying, hey, do you smell the smoke when you hit a foul ball? You know, it's unbelievable. The things that these guys recognize. And sometimes, as with Ted Williams, who was the manager of the Washington Senators, he just wasn't a good manager because he could not be a great teacher, and actually became frustrated with players that couldn't live up to the standards that he had.
I'm killing it right now today. I had to Google it to double check, but I was 100% right. So the what Mark McGuire was talking about is synesthesia. This, and it's a thing where you associate cross senses, and it usually makes you hyper aware of things. So like a good example of synesthesia is some of the best musicians in the world. They see when they look at a piece of sheet music, they see different notes as different colors.
Oh, wow.
And so Mark McGuire is describing is literally Williams. Sorry. What he's describing is that when his mind would see something, it was so locked in on what that pitch was that his body associated a smell with it. And so there's other people who see, when they see like numbers, they'll have a certain smell, and their brain's working on freaking overdrive. So people with synesthesia have like sometimes will be like the most talented people at certain things because their brain like connects these things, and because for some reason they see different like music notes as colors, it allows their brain to process it faster than a normal person who actually has to process, okay, C, D, E, F, what am I playing here?
Yeah.
So him saying, do you not smell the smoke? That's to me, that's a synesthesia thing.
Or seeing the red dot.
We're seeing the red dot.
And some guys do, some guys don't. And I think it's probably hard, like a guy like Ted Williams, when he tells somebody, hey, look for the red dot, and they don't see the red dot, then how do you tell what a curveball is? There's got to be another way.
That's 100%. His brain was doing something, and that's why when the like it's crazy sometimes when like we watch sports a lot, and I think sometimes, I don't know if you guys do this, sometimes I'll zoom out and be like, oh, these people are superhumans.
Yes.
The majority of these people are absolute superhumans, and sometimes we don't think about that. So here's my thing: we have, across all sports, but especially baseball, we have dozens of examples that the top 15 players in a sport's history almost universally are not good coaches. There's so against that, I have one very small example to fight against that towering bit of evidence, but I think it matters because everything you said is correct. But what does the last bit of what we saw Albert Pujols as the player potentially assuage those worries? Because Albert Pujols in 2022, through the iPad, became a teacher for a guy like Juan Yepes. So I know, again, it's a small anecdote against a mount of evidence that the greatest players cannot speak to these.
He also said Yepes was going to hit 1,000 home runs.
He did, so he was wrong, but still. Does him showing that he can work with a player, specifically it becoming something where he became a big fan of the iPad breakdowns, and that was kind of how he worked with the younger generation. Does that example from 2022 potentially give you some hope?
Potentially. Now, let me tell you something. There are two teams that are talking about and maybe talking with Albert Pujols right now. The very young Baltimore Orioles and the veteran-laden San Diego Padres. I would feel much better about Albert Pujols being able to prepare a veteran team and explain to them how to go about winning than going to a young team like the Orioles and trying to teach them how to play. The Padres guys, I mean, look around. You've got Machado, who he's very tight with, by the way. You've got Bogarts, you've got Cronenworth, you've got Tatis. Even Jackson Merrill, with a couple of years under his belt, has become kind of a veteran guy. They've got a veteran team that I think needs help learning how to get over the hump. Not that Mike Schilt could have never done that, but Mike Schilt isn't there anymore. But if I were the Padres, I would look at a guy like Albert more than a guy that has never won. I think it's the old teaching coach versus championship coach that Doug Armstrong has talked about before. I think they're past the teaching aspect now in San Diego, and now they need that championship guy. That might be the perfect spot for him. Think about Bob Brenly taking over for Buck Showalter in Arizona. What did the Diamondbacks do in Bob Brenly's first year? He'd never managed before. They go to the World Series and win it. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Oh, Alex Cora in Boston. They get through a point with, and they had a lot of veteran players on that team, but a lot of youth as well. Alex Cora takes over, really good player, and he prepares them for winning. It wasn't teaching as much anymore as it was winning. And I think that's the kind of manager that Albert Pujols would need to be. And I also think, by the way, that a spot like San Diego, where there isn't tremendous media attention or media pressure, would benefit him as well, where he can ease into the media requirements and everything that goes with it. And the other part of this is I think that a guy like A.J. Preller, who loves stars, he's kind of a sniffer. I think A.J. Preller would love a guy like Albert Pujols. By the way, if I were the Padres, I know A.J. Preller and Mark McGwire have a good relationship. I would call Big Mac, too, because I think Big Mac would be an excellent manager there. We know McGwire can teach. We know McGwire knows how to win. And if I'm A.J. Preller, that's one of the names that I'm going to. Now, McGwire, first-time manager at 63, not typical of baseball anymore. But you know what? Neither is bringing in a college coach like Tony Vitello. The good people in baseball are thinking outside the box, and I think that A.J. Preller is one of those guys, and I think they have a chance in San Diego. If they definitely have a chance in San Diego if they put the right guy in place.
I had not seen that name. The idea him staying over on the West Coast, which is bopping down it a bit to San Diego.
Big Mac?
It makes a lot
of Huntington Beach,
yeah. It makes a lot of sense to join up with the Padres. I like that thought process.
Yeah.
There and also a big thing on Suzuki, as we talk about like Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina. 3 years as a special assistant to the GM, and
so they know him really well.
A role that he was he was very active in that role.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to me that was the exact same title that they tried to give Yadier Molina, and then he didn't really show up to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of one of those things where, like, I get that you want to be a manager right now, but you might be a manager right now if you had just done the job.
If you actually participate the way that you said you were going to participate. And let's also point out that people like Kurt Suzuki, people like Yadier Molina have a distinct advantage because they were catchers. And for whatever reason, people that are in charge of baseball teams seem to like to hire catchers as their managers now. And you look around, Stephen Vogt in Cleveland, first-time guy, is doing a really good job as their manager. AJ Hinch in Detroit was a really good former catcher and now a manager. Dan Wilson, okay, maybe he didn't do the best job managing against Toronto in the ALCS, but he was in the ALCS and a former catcher who's now a manager. Kevin Cash, Tampa Bay, another example. Torey Lovullo, Arizona, another example. There's up and down the lineup. There are catchers, and of course, we've had our share here. Mike Matheny being the most notable, but that seems to be, like, for a guy like Kurt Suzuki, an advantage in that he's perceived as having managed from the field as a catcher, and so that's another reason that I think that he got the job in Anaheim, because Socha won a World Series there. So if Socha can do it as a former catcher, why can't Kurt Suzuki?
There you go. So throwing out San Diego, I want to go back to this. So okay. San Diego is a potential landing spot for Albert Pujols. Mm-hmm. Baltimore's still a potential one. If neither one of those happen, and let's say obviously the Yadi doesn't fall in either one of those either, do you see either of them or both of them joining a staff at the major league level this year?
Well, Yadi said he would.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
do you think it's like Skip Schumacher brings him in Texas?
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
I also think that if I were Chaim Bloom, I would, because he offered on Instagram to go to the minors. If I were Chaim Bloom, I would say, yeah, we'd love to have you as a minor league instructor, just to get you to go through the process so that you can learn the process of becoming a teacher and a leader of men at the minor league level, and then work your way up. We want you to be on our staff. We want you one day to become a major league manager. So yeah, let's carve out a role where you can work in the minors, maybe come up to the majors now and then, teach people how to play and show us what a great teacher you are. As far as Albert is concerned, by the way, it was reported that Artie Moreno, the owner of the Angels, who has a lot of money and gave Albert a lot of money, had Albert Pujols as his number one choice. If the Angels can't come to a contract agreement with Pujols because of a disagreement over money and term, I wonder who's out there that will pay him what he wants. Will the Orioles pay him what he wants? They have not shown an inclination lately to pay their managers a ton of money.
Credit to you, Mama, who came in at 303 with this one. No one else is going to give him more than the Angels.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Same thing with the Padres. They weren't paying Schilt a ton of money. So I wonder if anybody now, aside from the Cubs and the Dodgers, and the Cubs are giving Counsell $8 million, and I think Roberts wound up getting more than Counsell. But aside from that, managers aren't making what they made back in the day when you had Dusty and you had Tony and you had Bobby Cox, you had Joe Torre, all those guys making a ton of money. Now, because management, and by the way, Joe Madden was another one of those guys, because management thinks that all you need to do is have a manager that leads men in a clubhouse. He really doesn't have to do the math work. He doesn't really need to be a guy that makes the moves. He doesn't need to manage our team because we're doing that for him. So they don't pay him as much.
So let me throw out a potential then here. Like you said, Yachty said MLB, Mexico, minor leagues. He wants to be a coach or a manager. So let's say the Cardinals have already had a departure from the coaching staff. As it was announced at the end of last week that Joe McEwing will not return to the Cardinals next year.
Another special assistant.
There's also talks that potentially one of the pairing of John Jay or Descalso could go to Texas to work with Skip.
And Jay worked with him in Florida.
Jay worked with him in Florida. I think a lot of those things tell me that there's a good chance that Yachty's on the bench this year.
The thing is,
I'd like it too. I think it'd be so much fun.
I think it'd be interesting. But if you're going to replace John Jay, you better replace two guys if you're going to replace him with Yachty, because you need somebody to teach these outfielders how to play the outfield.
Yep.
And I don't think that they have that guy. All due respect to Pop Warner and Stubby Clapp and the other people on this staff, I don't think you have a real good outfield coach. And one of the things that Jay did last year, we saw Jordan Walker get a lot better. We saw Scott ascend a little bit. We saw Alec Burleson get better as an outfielder last year. And many of those improvements were a result of John Jay doing a great job with what you'd think are remedial drills, but he put those guys through their paces every single day. And they also had enough respect for John Jay that they let him actually do the job, which they didn't always do with Willie McGee. So if they would lose Yanye, and I would be disappointed by that, I would hope that they would also hire, if it's Yachty, I think they need to have an outfield coach here. Hey, Missouri, get ready. The wait is almost over. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is coming soon to the Show Me State, and you can sign up today. New Missouri customers get $300 in bonus bets when DraftKings launches on December 1st. Download the app now and place a $5 bet when DraftKings goes live, and DraftKings Sportsbook will bring everything you need to elevate your game day, including live in-game betting, lightning-fast payouts, and endless ways to get in on the action, all right from your phone. And when DraftKings officially goes live in Missouri, you'll be betting with a sportsbook app trusted by millions. It's safe, it's secure, and has fast money withdrawals. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code STL Sports to grab $300 in bonus bets with just a $5 bet when DraftKings goes live December 1st in Missouri. That's code STL Sports in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 plus, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Excludes customers who redeem pre-launch sign-up offer. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos.